Lyra had lived her entire life with rules carved deep into her mind, rules repeated to every Cerulean child from the day they learned to speak. Her species valued discipline, emotional control, and distance from anything that could disturb their inner balance. And nothing disturbed them more, at least according to their elders, than humans. Humans were unpredictable, expressive, impulsive, and far too open with their emotions. To the Cerulean Council, physical affection between Ceruleans and humans was strictly forbidden, because they believed it created confusion and unstable energy responses. Lyra accepted this belief for most of her life. Not because she understood it, but because she had never questioned anything before. It was easy to follow rules when she lived among her own kind, but things changed when she was assigned to the Joint Research Station orbiting a quiet blue planet in a distant sector. There, humans and Ceruleans worked side by side as equal members of the research crew. She was prepared to learn new technology and new methods of exploration, but she was not prepared to meet a human who made her heart behave in a way she could not explain. His name was Evan, a calm but hard-working engineer with bright eyes that always carried a gentle spark. He was known on the station for fixing anything that malfunctioned, from broken supply drones to temperature regulators. While other humans on the station were loud or overly talkative, Evan was different. He spoke slowly, softly, choosing his words with care. He never tried to annoy her or invade her space. In fact, he always kept a respectful distance, a habit she noticed immediately because most humans did not bother with such things. Whenever she looked in his direction, he seemed busy, focused, but still somehow aware of her presence. Lyra tried ignoring the strange sensation she felt whenever he greeted her or worked beside her. It was a quiet pulling inside her chest, a warmth that settled at the center of her being. She convinced herself it was nothing, maybe curiosity, maybe admiration. Humans were known for being expressive and warm. Perhaps her body was simply reacting to his tone or kindness. She told herself it was harmless, but every time Evan helped her, the warmth returned a little stronger. He would hold a heavy tool steady while she adjusted the settings. He would kneel to open a floor panel so she did not need to bend in uncomfortable positions. He would patiently explain steps she missed, without sounding annoyed or judging her. Lyra was trained in emotional control, yet she found herself struggling whenever he stood too close. She would breathe a little too fast, her pulse would rise, and the faint shimmer under her skin, the natural Cerulean emotional response, threatened to awaken. She always hid it before anyone noticed. For weeks, she fought this internal conflict, even though Evan remained unaware of her struggle. She kept her voice steady around him, kept her body still, kept her gaze low, hoping the feelings would disappear on their own. But they didn't. They only grew. Everything changed during a quiet maintenance shift. Lyra and Evan were assigned to inspect the lower lab sector, an area rarely used except for experiments requiring isolation. Most of the floor panels were cold, and the lights hummed faintly. Lyra walked ahead holding a scanner. Evan followed a few steps behind, checking the electrical grid. It was supposed to be a simple task, just another uneventful day. Without warning, the entire station shook. A violent vibration rattled the walls, the lights blinked out, and the temperature dropped instantly. A sharp alarm echoed through the hallway before the power system failed completely. Lyra stumbled forward as a metal wall panel broke free and slammed into the ground. When she tried to retreat, a second panel fell behind her, trapping her inside the lab with the door jammed. She pressed her hands against the door, calling for Evan. Her voice remained steady, but inside, she felt rising panic. The oxygen stabilizers had gone offline, and the air quality in the sealed lab dropped quickly. A thin, cold mist began to form, making her breaths shallow. She tried activating the emergency panel, but the system was dead. Outside, Evan heard the metal crash and sprinted toward her. When he found the blocked doorway, he immediately dropped his tools and examined the damage. The door was jammed so tightly that even emergency override hydraulics were crushed. He yelled her name through the cracks, and when she answered in a breathless whisper, something in his voice changed. He became urgent, determined, focused in a way she had never seen. He braced his hands against the crushed emergency panel and pulled with force that seemed impossible for a single human. Lyra could hear him grunting with effort, metal grinding under the pressure of his strength. She stood close to the door, knowing he was fighting to reach her. The air inside thinned further, making her legs weak. After several desperate attempts, the panel finally gave way a few centimeters. Evan forced his fingers inside the gap and pulled again, ignoring the sparks and sharp edges cutting his skin. Bit by bit, inch by inch, he widened the opening until Lyra could see his face illuminated by the red emergency light. His forehead was damp with sweat, and a thin cut marked his knuckle. But he didn't stop. With a final pull, the door shifted enough for him to slip inside. Lyra's breath trembled with relief. Evan grabbed her arm gently, steadying her as she stumbled. His touch was warm despite the cold air. It was a simple contact, a supportive gesture. But her entire body reacted instantly. The shimmer under her skin ignited in a soft glow, spreading faint light across her arm like silver dust moving beneath the surface. It was the emotional response that Sorellans experienced only during deep attachment, but she had never felt it before, not even among her own people. Lyra quickly stepped back, horrified. If anyone saw the glow, they would report her to the council. Evan looked confused but not frightened. Instead of asking what it was, he gently placed his hands on her shoulders to keep her steady. His calm eyes stayed on hers, not judging, only worried for her well-being. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She managed to nod, though inside she felt something breaking, some rule or barrier she had held onto for years. Evan guided her toward the exit, supporting her weight as the oxygen levels stabilized in the hallway. She felt dizzy not from lack of air but from the emotional storm inside her. The rest of the station crew arrived minutes later. They secured the area and began repairs. But Evan stayed close, refusing to leave her side until she regained full strength. Lyra avoided his eyes, afraid he might see too much. When the crew asked if she needed medical attention, she quietly said no. If she went to the Sarellan medical bay, they might detect traces of her emotional glow in her energy readings. She could not let that happen. That night in her quarters, she tried meditating to calm her thoughts, but every memory kept returning. Evan forcing open the door, his desperate voice calling her name, the warmth of his hands, the glow she couldn't hide. She pressed her fingers against her arm, remembering the soft silver light. It still felt warm. She sat in silence for a long time, staring at her hands. She had broken no physical rule, yet emotionally she felt she had crossed a line her species considered dangerous. She had let a human touch her, and instead of resisting, her body responded with a glow meant only for deep connection. She tried convincing herself it was just the stress of the moment, nothing more. But a small part of her whispered that she had felt this warmth long before the accident. She had just ignored it. Evan had always been gentle with her. He never treated her like an outsider. He respected her space, listened to her, and offered help without expecting anything in return. She felt something new, fear, mixed with longing. She wanted to be near him, wanted to hear his voice, wanted to feel the steady comfort of his presence. But she also knew the risk. If the Sarellan Council discovered her emotional reaction toward a human, they would demand explanations she could not give. They would call it instability. They would call it a violation of centuries-old boundaries. Yet she could not lie to herself anymore. Evan's touch had awakened something she had no strength to push away. She didn't know what it meant or how far it would go, but she knew one thing clearly: she could no longer pretend she felt nothing. And that frightened her more than anything she had ever faced. Lyra tried to return to her normal routine the next day, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every hallway of the station reminded her of the emergency, of the moment Evan reached through the crushed door and held her arm with desperate determination. Whenever she closed her eyes, she could still feel the warmth of his touch spreading through her skin. Her people always claimed that humans were unpredictable and emotionally overwhelming, but she had never imagined the truth would feel so gentle instead of dangerous. She walked through the engineering deck with calm steps, pretending that everything inside her was still under control. She greeted her fellow Sarellan workers with the same polite nod, gave short reports to her superiors, and checked the energy readings of the restored lab sector. But even as she worked, she kept sensing the presence of a familiar human somewhere nearby. Evan was repairing a console with 2 junior technicians. He looked focused. But the moment his eyes drifted toward her, he paused for a second. Lyra quickly looked away, pretending to inspect a panel. She did not want him to see the uncertainty on her face. She feared that if she met his eyes too long, her emotions would once again rise beyond control. She had avoided him since the accident, choosing different routes, different assignments, and shorter shifts. Her goal was simple: distance. But humans, she realized, were observant in their own way, especially Evan. He noticed patterns quickly, and he certainly noticed her avoidance. He watched her slip out of rooms the moment he stepped inside. He noticed how she handed him reports without meeting his gaze. He even noticed how she kept taking extra tasks so she wouldn't have to work near him. Later that day, when she was walking through a quiet maintenance corridor, she heard footsteps behind her. Before she could step into a side room, Evan called her name gently. His voice echoed softly, calm but carrying a concerned tone. She froze. Evan approached slowly, careful not to startle her. He left more space than necessary, showing again the respect she always admired. He looked tired, perhaps from the long repairs, but his eyes were warm and honest. He quietly asked her why she had been avoiding him. She did not answer at first. She tried to look away, but he gently asked again, not with pressure but with genuine worry. He wanted to know if she was uncomfortable around him. Lyra hesitated, struggling between her training and her emotions. She finally whispered that her species had rules, strict rules about physical closeness with humans. She didn't explain everything, but she told him enough for him to understand that the incident had caused trouble for her. Evan didn't react with anger or frustration. Instead, he nodded with understanding. He didn't accuse her of hiding anything, nor did he demand the full truth. He simply said he didn't want to cause her problems and that her comfort mattered to him. Those words broke her emotional shield more deeply than anything else had before. For her whole life, she had been taught that emotions were dangerous. Yet every time she spoke to Evan, she realized emotions didn't have to be loud or wild. They could be gentle. They could be steady. They could make her feel safe, rather than shaken. But safety ended when the Saralan inspectors arrived on the station. They came unexpectedly, traveling with urgency after detecting the unusual energy readings from the lab emergency. Lyra felt the shock ripple through the crew when their ship docked. Saralan inspectors rarely visited human-operated areas, and when they did, they always expected perfection. The inspectors were tall, stern, and trained in emotional analysis. Their duty was to maintain the discipline of their kind. They reviewed the sensor logs, summoned officers, and asked for a detailed report of the accident. They even sealed the damaged lab again for private inspection. Lyra could sense the tension at once. They were looking specifically for unstable emotional signatures. That night, after long interrogations with the engineering team, one of the inspectors pulled her aside. He asked about her location during the emergency, her emotional readings, and who she was with. Lyra stood straight, her hands behind her back, trying to appear calm. She answered every question carefully, but her voice felt tight. The inspector watched her closely, analyzing every blink, every breath, every vibration of her energy field. When he asked who assisted her during the emergency, Lyra's breath halted for a moment. She knew if she said Evan's name, the inspector would want to speak with him too. The council disliked close interactions between their citizens and humans. She considered lying. But lies left echoes in their biological energy fields. Echoes that trained inspectors could easily detect. Even if she hid the name, they could trace the energy signatures and find out anyway. Before she could speak, Evan appeared at the entrance of the hall, accidentally interrupting the conversation. His timing could not have been worse. The inspector turned sharply and looked at him with suspicion. Evan sensed the tension and approached carefully, asking if Lyra was okay. Without thinking, Lyra reached toward him, not much. Just an instinctive movement, as if she needed the stability of his presence. Her fingertips touched his wrist for a fraction of a second. The glow returned immediately, faint but visible, a soft silver shimmer that washed across her hand. The inspector's eyes widened in shock. Lyra pulled back instantly, but the damage was done. The faint glow had already been seen. It was something the Council insisted could never happen between a Saralan and a human. Lyra's heart dropped, knowing she had revealed the one thing she was trying desperately to hide. Evan did not understand the meaning of her glow, but he understood her fear. He stepped between her and the inspector, insisting she had been under stress during the emergency, and that none of this was her fault. He took the blame for prying open the door, for the risk, for everything that could have caused emotional distress. The inspector wasn't convinced. He requested both of them to report to the Saralan inquiry room. Lyra could barely breathe. She was certain that this was the moment everything would fall apart. She would be charged with emotional instability, Evan could be restricted from Saralan operations, and their working relationship would be severed. The inquiry was scheduled for the next morning. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, holding her hands tightly in her lap. Her mind replayed the glow again and again. She wondered if she could control it next time. But deep inside, she knew she couldn't. The glow wasn't something she activated. It was something that appeared when her heart responded to something deeply. She had never experienced it before she met Evan. She also kept remembering the way he stepped forward to take the blame, as if he were protecting her from consequences he didn't even understand. Humans were known for bravery and sudden action, but this felt different. It wasn't loud or reckless. It was quiet, steady, and honest. She felt warmth in her chest again, dangerous warmth, but this time it didn't scare her as much. The next morning, Evan found her in the hallway before the inquiry began. He told her he would speak first, that he would explain the situation so she wouldn't be placed in danger. She wanted to tell him he didn't need to, but words failed her. She only managed to nod. Evan gently promised that whatever happened, he wouldn't let her face it alone. When they entered the inquiry chamber, 3 Saralan inspectors waited behind a glowing panel. Their expressions were unreadable. They asked Lyra to step forward first. Evan stood behind her silently, ready to intervene. Lyra answered their questions honestly at first, explaining the emergency and Evan's role. But when they asked why she exhibited an energy glow during the rescue, she froze. She searched for the right explanation but found none. Before she could speak, Evan suddenly stepped forward and said the glow happened because she had been frightened and disoriented. He insisted that the glow was not emotional attachment but a reaction to the stress of losing oxygen. He blamed himself for causing it by breaking into the lab so forcefully. The inspectors did not fully accept his reasoning, but they allowed Lyra to continue. When asked if she wanted the human removed from her assignments, Lyra did something she never expected of herself. She answered with quiet clarity. She said she did not want him removed. She said Evan's presence calmed her, not destabilized her. She said she trusted him. The room fell silent. Evan looked at her with surprise, his expression softening. The inspectors exchanged confused glances. Saralans rarely admitted personal trust toward humans. The glow they saw could not be ignored. Yet they could not deny Lyra's calm state as she spoke. Her energy levels were balanced, not unstable. It contradicted everything their laws predicted. The inspectors ended the session without punishment, but demanded more observation. Lyra felt relief, but also fear of what would come next. As they left the chamber, Evan gently asked if she was okay. She turned toward him slowly. Instead of pulling away like before, she took a small step closer, not enough to break rules, but enough to show she wasn't running anymore. For the first time in her life, she chose her own emotion, rather than the rule that tried to control it. And that choice felt both terrifying and beautiful. Lyra could feel the air shift on the station after the inquiry. Everyone sensed something unusual had happened, even if they didn't know the full story. Humans and Sarellans alike had noticed the inspector's arrival, the sudden change in schedules, and the unusual tension that hung in the hallways. Some crew members whispered theories, but no one dared to ask Lyra or Evan directly. Still, Lyra felt eyes on her whenever she passed by, not in a hostile way, but with curiosity and quiet caution. She tried to stay focused, but her thoughts kept drifting to the inquiry chamber, to the moment she admitted she trusted Evan. She had never spoken so boldly in her life. Even she was surprised by the certainty in her voice. Trusting someone so openly was something Saralans rarely did, especially toward humans. Yet when she said those words, she had felt a calmness she had never known before. It felt right, honest, and deeply personal. And the way Evan looked at her afterward, grateful, surprised, and warm, made her feel something new entirely. She couldn't name it, but it made her heart feel lighter. Despite her inner shift, the rules didn't disappear. The inspectors still kept watch from a distance. They observed her work patterns, checked her emotional readings more frequently, and reviewed her reports with unusual detail. It felt like a quiet pressure weighing on her shoulders. But even under that pressure, she found herself less afraid. She didn't shrink away when Evan walked into a room. She didn't avoid him or take detours around the station. She stood near him during briefings, worked beside him when needed, and even allowed small moments where they spoke privately. One afternoon, while repairing a stabilizer in the docking sector, Evan approached her with his usual careful steps. He didn't touch her, not even close, but his presence alone made her pulse rise in a way she had started to accept. He asked gently if she was all right, considering the constant inspections. Lyra replied that she was trying her best to stay calm. Evan hesitated, then admitted that he wished he could do more to help her. She looked at him, noticing how sincere he was. Humans often displayed emotions on their faces, but Evan's expressions were always subtle, like soft ripples instead of waves. Lyra told him that he had already helped more than he realized. She said she would not have remained steady during the inquiry without him. Evan's eyes softened even more. He told her he believed she was stronger than she thought. Lyra felt warmth spread inside her chest, a warmth she no longer tried to suppress. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't chaotic. It was simply human. And she didn't mind that anymore. Their private moment didn't go unnoticed. A Saralan inspector passing through the corridor paused briefly, watching them before continuing on. Lyra didn't hide this time. She stood tall, unafraid of being observed. She didn't reach for Evan, but she didn't step away from him either. That alone felt like a quiet act of courage. Later that week, she received notice to attend a final evaluation alone. The message explained that the council wanted to review her emotional stability after the incident and determine whether she would remain on the station or be reassigned. Lyra felt her heart tighten. Being reassigned meant leaving the research station, leaving her work, and leaving Evan. She tried not to think about that part too much, but it was impossible to ignore. The thought of not seeing him every day felt strangely painful. Evan found her sitting quietly in a small observation room facing the planet below. She held the message in her hands, staring at it silently. When he asked what was wrong, she finally admitted everything. She told him the council might remove her from the station. She spoke slowly, trying not to let her voice break. Evan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he moved a little closer, not touching, but standing near enough for her to feel his steady presence. He told her that no matter what happened, he wanted her to know he cared about her well-being. The words hit her deeper than she expected. No one from her species ever expressed care so openly. She felt her breath catch, and her eyes lowered to the floor. She whispered that she did not want to leave the station, and Evan understood without needing more explanation. The final evaluation came the next morning. Lyra entered the chamber to find the three inspectors again, but this time their expressions were more conflicted than strict. They reviewed her readings, her behavior, her performance reports, and even her emotional patterns since the emergency. Then they asked her one final question: whether she felt her connection with the human was interfering with her ability to perform her duties. Lyra stood silent for a long moment. She could have chosen the safe answer, the logical one. She could have said no and pretended nothing had changed inside her. But she didn't want to lie, not to them, and not to herself. She finally said that her emotions had changed because of the human, but that they had not weakened her discipline. Instead, they had made her more aware, more focused, and more grounded than before. She said his presence had helped her stay calm during danger and remain steady during the inquiry. The inspectors exchanged looks, They were unsure. Their laws claimed emotional closeness with humans created instability. But Lyra was living proof of the opposite. She was calm, clear-minded, and fully capable of her duties. Her glow had appeared, yes, but it had not harmed her. After a long discussion among themselves, the inspectors delivered their decision. They would not remove her from the station. They would not classify her as unstable. They would instead mark her case as unique and allow her to continue her duties under her own responsibility. It was not a perfect victory, but it was freedom, far more freedom than she expected. When Lyra stepped out of the chamber, she found Evan waiting again. Just like before. The moment she saw him, all the tension she had been holding inside released at once. Evan looked at her with worry, then relief when he saw the small smile forming on her lips. She told him softly that she was allowed to stay. That simple sentence filled his eyes with warmth. Without thinking, Lyra moved closer to him. She did not reach for his hand, but she stood close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. A faint, gentle silver glow shimmered beneath her skin, soft, quiet, and peaceful. Evan noticed it this time, and instead of being confused, he simply smiled. She felt no fear of being seen. A few humans and Sarellans nearby paused when they saw the glow, whispering in surprise, but neither she nor Evan stepped back. News spread across the station over the next few hours. People couldn't believe what they had witnessed, a Sarellan showing emotional glow near a human without distress or instability. Some were shocked, some curious, some worried, but many felt hopeful. For years, both species believed deep emotional bonds were impossible. Now, they had proof that the old beliefs might be wrong. Lyra felt lighter than she had in her entire life. She no longer had to hide her reactions. She no longer had to run away from her feelings or distance herself from the one person who made her feel safe. She could simply exist. Freely. Without fear. And Evan, always quiet and respectful, remained at her side, never pushing her, never rushing her. He let her choose her own pace, her own comfort, her own steps. Over the next days, she and Evan slowly built a new understanding, one of mutual trust, gentle closeness, and small moments shared between shifts. They would talk during quiet hours on the viewing deck, sometimes about work, sometimes about human traditions or Sarellan customs. Lyra learned that humans expressed feelings through small gestures, an encouraging smile, a patient pause, a warm tone. Evan learned that Sarellans expressed emotions through subtle shifts in energy and soft shimmering under their skin. One evening, as they stood together, watching the planet turning silently beneath them, Lyra felt the glow rise again, calm and steady. She didn't pull away. Evan didn't step back. They stood side by side, letting the soft light fill the quiet space around them. And in that peaceful silence, Lyra realized something important. Breaking the old rule had not weakened her, it had transformed her. She was stronger, clearer, and more alive than ever before. Her species had feared human affection. But she learned that affection, when given freely and respectfully, did not trap or confuse her. It anchored her. It made her understand her own emotions more deeply, and it made her see that connection across species was not something to fear, it was something that could change everything. In time, others would question the old rules. Others would see the possibilities she and Evan had shown. But for now, as she stood beside him with the soft glow shimmering under her skin, she felt content simply being exactly where she wanted to be, beside the human whose presence made her feel more complete than she ever imagined.